The end of Turner Galleries. Wow, it's sad, and I think that's been the feedback from every person who's come through the door since we announced it in mid-November. It's going to leave a great hole in the arts community because it wasn't just working with the artists and doing fabulous shows, it was the community that we brought together.
If you think you've contributed something for 20 years, you would like it to be remembered. And not necessarily in specifics, but just in general, that was a contribution. When I started the gallery, people would talk about the contribution of Rose Skinner and Sherry Lewis and the legacy of past galleries and other people who had worked in the arts. And I guess it's nice to add yourself to that list. My name is Helen Turner and I'm the director of Turner Galleries. And yeah, that's who I am. I developed an interest in art probably in high school, although I do recall my art teacher telling me, "Don't you worry about art, Turner, you're useless at it," which was quite amusing, and I've always wanted to let him know that I'm not quite that useless at it now. That was a long time ago. Then I married, had children, worked as a school teacher. I worked for an architect. Then I, as a mature age student, when my children had gone to school, decided that I would do something for myself and go to art school and pursue that interest. So I went to Claremont School of Art for 3 years, and at the end of those years, the students that I were friends with all talked about developing an artist-run space, and I was the one left with the idea that an artist-run space in a gallery would be a great way forward with my interests. So it kind of happened by chance that the church that was nearby where I lived and nearby the art school was for sale. And it was a heritage listed building that no one really wanted to buy because of the restrictions on it architecturally. But I could see the potential of running a gallery space inside it and the development potential of building some units at the back. So I was lucky enough to purchase it for a really reasonable price and started working with the architect that I knew, Brian Cloppert, and Michael Richardson. And I had this very grand gallery design and 4 housing units at the back. And there I was, immersed in a future that I hadn't really quite thought of at the time. I was very much the new kid on the block amongst a number of very established galleries, Dusseldorf, Goddard de Fiddes, Perth Galleries, Gallery East. They were all there as the long established and operating galleries of the time, and I started up this church and they all wondered, well, who's this and what's she doing? Because I had no knowledge and no connections in the art world apart from my experience at the Claremont School of Art and meeting the artists and teachers there. Meeting Allison was a very defining moment in the gallery through the Sir Charles Gardner Art Prize, and subsequently having her come on board and work with me really helped to shape and develop the whole gallery.
I was the acting art curator for the Sir Charles Gardner Hospital in 1999, and the art committee at the hospital at the time decided that for the first time their annual art award, which was one of the more important art awards in Perth back in the 1990s, they wanted to take it out of the hospital and have it in a more public space to raise the profile of the exhibition. And one of the committee members actually knew this woman who was opening a gallery, and that's how I got to meet Helen.
The very first night the gallery opened was an interesting mix of possible success and possible disaster, because right when the speeches were being made at this very official art prize opening, the entire lights went out in the gallery space and everybody was left in darkness. And with me leaping across the room like John Cleese saying, don't worry, I know where the lights are, I'll fix it." And I should have thought perhaps there will be some bad along with the good at that point in time.
So the opening show for the Church Gallery, as it was at the time, that was in October 1999. That was actually the last day of my contract with Sir Charles Gairdner Hospital. And at the time I was also the gallery manager at Art Place, where I'd been for about 4.5 years. And the director there was somewhat unhappy with my involvement with this new fledgling gallery, even though it was through Sir Charles Gairdner Hospital. And basically she fired me. So Helen took advantage of this in the most beautiful way and slowly brought me on board. I think together we really worked well and bounced off each other and brought two different skill sets to running a gallery. She was really good with talking to people and getting people together, and she wanted the gallery to have very much a focus on education and learning, the exchange of ideas. When I first started working with Helen, she had already started booking artists for the gallery space. So Helen and I inevitably started talking about, what is the future of the gallery going to be? What are the parameters? What is the curatorial framework for pulling together an exhibition program so that you're not jumping from works that are really challenging and conceptually really interesting to works that are then very decorative.
Just after the gallery opened, I had a wonderful visit from David Bromfield. I remember David very fondly telling me all the ins and outs of how a gallery runs and what I should and shouldn't do. And I remembered at one stage saying to him, "David, do you mind if I just get a piece of paper and take some notes?" Because I really felt that what he was giving me as information was really valuable, and that I had absolutely no idea what I had let myself in for. The climate at the time when I started the church is quite interesting, because I think although buoyant with all of those galleries operating at the time, the 80s were probably a more flamboyant economic time in Australia. So I don't think I ever experienced the flamboyant purchasing of art that happened in the 80s, but I didn't know about that, so I just accepted life as it were and got on with it and worked with the artists and showed the work that I wanted to show. And I think at the outset I thought that perhaps the gallery would become a commercial enterprise and look after itself, but that I was also willing to be a philanthropist and support that during its time.
I think there were some really important differences between Turner galleries and other commercial spaces. And one of the most important was Helen early on decided to not represent artists. And this was a really big thing, because not only did that make the other galleries sit up and go, "What do you think you're doing?" It also impacted on the relationship with the artists, because they could work with a gallery professionally and not be held to task about what they were doing and where they were doing it. And this really encouraged the artists that we worked with to become more independent, to seek out opportunities outside of the gallery, because we were supporting them in all those decisions and not putting a hand out for a shared commission with other spaces. In many ways, being generous was actually a really positive thing, and it came back to the gallery in many ways, especially with artists being hugely loyal. They didn't go off and join other galleries. They would tell us what they were doing and where they were doing it, invite us to other shows, and I think that really made what Turner Galleries became really something really special and different and important in the local arts world. Another thing that made Turner and Helen's vision of what a commercial gallery should be, what made it different from others, was the Artist in Residence program.
The residency program that we established wasn't something that necessarily is in that commercial defined area of running a gallery, but I valued that possibility for people. In my mind, it was a little bit of an idea that would expand the art scene in Perth and expand the horizons that West Australian artists would have, and broaden the exchange of conversation between art in the East and the West. If I could encourage high-profile artists to come and do a residency with us and have a show with us in this manner, that it would benefit everybody. The arts community here, the gallery, the artists themselves, and just the community at large.
The residency program ran into a few problems that first year because we realised that some of the artists we were inviting financially couldn't afford to come. So Helen came up with the idea of the Art Angels, which was actually Tom Gibbons' name for the group because we were housed in a church.
The Art Angels came out of an idea that we would have a number of private individuals fund the project, and collectively we would be able to use that money to achieve our goals. And the goal was to bring 3 artists annually to Perth, to pay for their airfares, pay for their accommodation, pay for a hire car if that were possible, and also to have them contribute by making a limited edition print run. So we would pay them for the production of this print run, and then this is what would be given to each of those people who sponsored the program. Then we had an even better idea that once we'd worked out our costs, that 40% of the money would be put into another trust account, and from that account we would purchase artworks by West Australian artists, and then at the end of the year those purchased works would be given away in a lucky draw to the winning Art Angel whose number came out of the barrel. I relocated the gallery from Claremont to Northbridge in 2007. I put everything up for auction and started looking for a warehouse style, open and minimal space to show work in. I was lucky enough to come across this building which was an old engine exchange. It was a really very grungy old garage space that once again had not a great deal of value attached to it other than the land values. So that was important too, to find somewhere that wasn't going to cost me a great deal of money again and be able to be developed in the way that I wanted to. But while the development took place here, we rented a small shopfront space down the road just so that I could be nearby to keep an eye on it and that we would maintain a presence and not drop off everybody's radar, but that we were still operating as a gallery. I recall the very first artwork that we sold that was of any momentous value, and it was a Philip Berry painting, and we were just beside ourselves because we had sold a painting that was worth $3,500, and this was beyond all belief to both of us, so that was very, very exciting. I suppose things happened gradually after that because as you work and you put in energy and time, things take place and you are a little more recognised by those in the same field as you. We at one stage applied to go to the Melbourne Art Fair and were knocked back. And then just before the art fair was ready to open, maybe a couple of weeks before, the organisation of the art fair contacted us and said, "We've had a cancellation, would you still like to come?" And so, although we were in no way ready for that, we said yes, because it was so exciting to be acknowledged and to be accepted. And I remember that we put together the most amazing show, and a very, very significant memory from that exhibition was the sale of Gillian Green's artwork for $18,000 to a private client in Melbourne whom we had never met or seen before, and we were just beside ourselves with joy. The first international art fair that we did was extremely exciting and a level of development that I had never expected the gallery to go to. We applied to the Taipei Art Fair and were accepted with Gregory Pryor's work. That was in 2016, and out of that visit we established a subsequent exchange program with the Quandu Museum of Fine Arts. And the next 2 years were very exciting with Professor Chu, who came to Perth, Yao Rei Chung, who came and did a joint residency with Pica and Turner Galleries. And it was probably something that was a little outside of our expertise and field as a commercial gallery, and we have subsequently asked Pika to take on that role and program. But whilst it was happening, it was a very validating and very humbling in one sense that a museum in Taipei would like to set up this exchange program with a small commercial gallery in Perth. All of the exhibitions that we've had have been really special to us, and working with all of those artists is an important and lasting memory for me.
Over 20 years, we've worked with so many different artists. There's just been so many extraordinary shows, and during the last few years of the gallery, we've been doing 3 shows every 4 weeks. When I started working for Helen back at the Church Gallery, and then when it became Turner Galleries and we moved here in 2007, I didn't think that I'd be here 20 years later. And I think the reason I've wanted to stay for all these years is because I really thought we were doing something important in the local art scene and doing really important shows and supporting local artists and bringing over artists from the eastern states to show here and to meet local curators and collectors and to work in conjunction with some of the local art schools. I thought what we were doing was really different and really important, and I hope that that's some sort of legacy after 20 years.
20 years of operating a gallery is quite a long time, and I would hope that the artists who have worked with us have all enjoyed that opportunity. We certainly have with them. And I think it's been a great privilege to have had the means to provide a building and a space and an opportunity to those artists and the community. It's not without regret that I am deciding to close that opportunity. It's just a personal choice at this point of my life to not be so directly involved in the running of a space, but support the arts in other ways that I'm able to, with a bit more freedom at the same time and without the encumbrance and responsibility of operating a continued exhibition space.
I think one of the sad things is the decline in commercial gallery spaces, in Perth in particular, and without people on the scene like Helen who do it as basically a philanthropic project because they want to support local art and they believe that Perth really has something special to offer the world. Without those people investing in art and supporting art and running galleries like this, it's a lesser place that we live in.
There was a time when Church Gallery and Turner Galleries didn't exist, and there will be other places and spaces that I'm sure that those artists will either create for themselves or will be created for them to exhibit and show in. That would be my hope, of course.
I think that's a major contribution that Helen has made, because I don't think a lot of people know that Helen has never received a wage. She has put her own money into running this space for 20 years at a loss, including paying me and looking after all the artists. We've always worked hugely hard to promote their work, and I think there's a public misconception that gallery dealers and gallery directors make a lot of money off the backs of artists, and that is just so not the case. Running a gallery takes an enormous investment of time and money. You've got enormous overheads, and that really needs to be applauded, that someone like Helen has invested so much time and money over 20 years into basically this big philanthropic project called Turner Galleries. Thank you, Helen.